Good morning. We are not Ivanka Trump. I'm Henry Harteveldt, founder of the Atmosphere Research Group, a travel industry research company. It's a pleasure to be here, and to be here with Craig Kreeger, CEO of Virgin Atlantic. We'll talk for a few minutes, and then we'll have some time at the end for audience Q&A. Craig, I want to start off. Thank you for flying across the pond to be here. Virgin is 31 years old, which I think a lot of us would say, oh, it seems a lot younger. The brand has obviously evolved. But as a lot of us here think about what marketing is and what marketing and branding and everything will be going forward, one of the things we talked about is it's less about so-called hard items, logo, livery, color palette, seats, things like that on the airplane, and more about softer items such as the culture and the people. Talk to me about that. Tell me how you guys see this evolving, how it plays into what Virgin Atlantic is and wants to be.
It's hard for me to actually completely separate those things. I think it's all of the above. A brand is fundamentally about kind of A, the promise, and B, what you deliver to that promise creates a brand. And Virgin Atlantic was created 31 years ago by Richard with just a very simple objective. And it was based upon his own observations of the travel business 31 years ago, which is it really wasn't very good for customers. And his first thought was, surely we can do better for customers. And that essence, that question, that concept of can't we do better for customers is what has fueled the Virgin Atlantic company for 31 years. And some of it is innovation on hard products, and we were the first airline to have a seat back video in all cabins. We created a premium economy cabin. We created lounges that I think that win awards justifiably. And so some of it is very much physical product, but ultimately those are all copyable. And what becomes more differentiating is the way in which your company actually delivers the service around those physical products and in that physical space. And that is really a product of the people of the company and the way in which they interact with customers. And when I think of the Virgin Atlantic brand and my role at Virgin Atlantic, a lot of it is about making sure that in the decisions we make as leaders of the company, we live up to the ethos of the people who deliver the product and service on the front line, who are so committed to our customers and to the company that is a very high standard for us. And that element, that pride in the company and the way they feel about the brand and the way it makes them feel about themselves is the magic that my job is basically not screw it up.
All right, but when you talk about the people, in particular, airlines would look for certain proficiencies, and we spoke about this earlier. A customer service person was hired for his or her ability to type into the computer, not interact with the people. So how are you evolving this? What are you telling your team and they telling theirs in looking for people, hiring for people to bring that brand to life, to bring the promise to life?
It always sounds a little trite to me because I hear lots of CEOs make statements or people in business about the way in which their people are the key assets of their company, and I think so. It doesn't ring great when I make the observation that having been at other places, it really is actually a legitimately true thing at Virgin Atlantic, and I get asked by other CEOs actually quite a bit. It was, how do you keep that magic? And the magic is that they're referring to is that feeling that our customers create if you think about a triangular relationship, there's a relationship between the company and its people and its customers, and of course the customers and the company. And that triangle, the key element in that triangle is the way that people feel about work. And we do things to try and ensure we keep that right. Things like we do hire people who are outgoing and people-oriented. We encourage them to be fun, and we're willing to live with a little bit of inconsistency in the interest of people being themselves. And we've made very clear, one of my key initiatives was to let our people know that I want them to make decisions on behalf of, to do right for customers. I may not agree with every decision that one of our people might make in a moment, but we will 100% back them up if they're doing the right thing for a customer. And to try and create a culture where that's perceived as good and okay, and people will take risks around it, that's the essence of, I think, what Richard created many years ago, and we're just trying to make sure we keep living up to.
Okay. One of the things you talked about is related to the people, the technology. You give them the technology your customers have access to, but finding the balance between the tech part and the human part. As you talk about this, the people and everything else, how do they come together? How do you strike that balance? What do you tell your employees?
Well, I think the company thinks about innovation and I'll talk about innovation in that context, and then we can come back and see whether I've kind of completely answered your question. We think of innovation as an element that customers expect from Virgin Atlantic. And that means that we have to try things that not everything we try has to work. So if I could give just 2 or 3 examples of innovation, how things have come to pass to try and link our people, technology, or our customers, or solve problems for customers, I think that will illustrate it. So you may have read about, and it was quite public about a year ago, the test we did with Google Glass. And that was for our premium check-in facility at Heathrow Airport. We wanted to get our agents out from behind the computer, greeting our customers, interacting with our customers directly, helping them with their bags if need be, but in any event, eliminating the barrier between the customer and the person who's taking care of them. And so Google Glass is one way to do that. Information like what time is the flight departing, whether at their destination, the gate it's leaving from, what the exact when boarding would begin. All that information was available on the computer, and we could have it available with a Google Glass device. And we also tried a Sony smartwatch. So we had half of our people using Sony smartwatches, half of our people using Google Glass, and we tried both technologies to see if we could create a better solution to take care of customers and not put a wall between ourselves and them. And it was very interesting. At first, the Google Glass was very distracting the first few days that people were using it, and they found themselves not making eye contact with customers. And in the early days, we were thinking this wasn't going to be a success. But as our team got used to using it, actually, they could make much more eye contact with our customers, and the information they needed was right there. And actually, we concluded Google Glass was actually a winning solution. The smartwatch, and it will be very interesting to see if this changes now that Apple is in this business, but the smartwatch, what we found was that this is actually the universal symbol for I'm bored with you. And not very helpful from a customer service perspective. And actually worse than sitting behind a computer where people knew you were looking at a computer and didn't feel like you were interrupting a conversation to do so. And actually, so the smartwatch was not a good customer service thing. And it was great. It was great we tried it. I don't think with where Google is going with Glass, it's likely to be the end solution, but it was a great example of something that worked great, and customers loved it. They all wanted to try on the Glass. It was really kind of novel. I think another interesting example, and one which I think innovation is a really interesting topic.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to sidetrack your question and talk about innovation. I think one of the interesting ironies that we have found about innovation is that innovation does not happen with a smart person sitting in a dark room dreaming up ideas. I mean, maybe that happens occasionally, and I'm sure there are incredible inspirations that happen that way. What we have found is that actually, and this is the ironic part, innovation actually requires structure. So exactly the opposite of what you would think you need to innovate, you actually need structure. And the key element of structure that we found are 2 things: the right people, and much more importantly, the right question. So the key thing for innovation is actually the question, it's not the answer. So if you put a group of smart people in a room and give them a very specific question, how can we make this part of the customer journey better? And the one that I'll give an example of, which is, this is a totally trivial idea, it's not a big deal, but it's a really an insightful example of how innovation happens, is how many of you have flown out of Heathrow Airport internationally? Okay, many of you. So the worst part of the customer journey in terms of the survey we've done about customers is the gate hold area, which I would describe as what Ellis Island probably used to look like when immigrants arrived here in this country. No windows, or if there are windows, they're blocked by a jet bridge, so you can't see anything out of them. A vending machine if you're lucky, no bathrooms, nothing else. And so this part of the journey is the antithesis of a Virgin Atlantic experience. So the question we tasked a group of people with is, what can we do to make this part of the experience more fun? And I was figuring we'd end up with examples of maybe put a little coffee hut there, and someplace you could, maybe some television, some entertainment. I didn't know what the answers were going to be, but we tasked the team with doing this. And they went through a series of meetings, and actually they came up with a completely different idea. And it was, let's call people to the gate 15 minutes later, which is kind of counterintuitive. So airlines love to have control of their customers, right? The worst thing of this answer would be if people arrived at the gate so late that we'd already should have departed, and we've been busy trying to find their bags on, in the hold. If we end up with very lengthy delays, but the idea of taking them to the gate 15 minutes later was the solution, and what that caused was by the time people arrived at the gate hold area, they could walk straight on board the airplane. We were already boarding. They didn't have to get there before boarding started, and because they came kind of intermittently from when we told them to be there, that nobody had much of a wait to get on the airplane. So the actual answer to how can you make this part of the experience more fun was to not actually put them in the hold area at all. And it was a great example of innovation. We tried it at 5 gates at Heathrow for 2 months. We saw our boarding experience scores jump by about a quarter, 25%. And it's a great example, not of brilliant technology, but smart people answering the right question. And that's what we think about innovation. It always starts with how can we make something about the customer journey better, and hopefully it ends with new ideas, some of which will work. And because we're small, we have 39 airplanes, we got test labs. We've got 39 test labs. We fly to maybe 40 cities, so we got 40 test labs for on the ground. We can try stuff. And because we're small, we can scale easily. And it's great. That creates a great environment for innovation. And I think the key thing for us in kind of unlocking that was this idea of bringing people together with structure and calling things tests. When you call them tests, people don't fear failure. When you call them implementations, they are afraid of failing. So we call them tests, we plan on scaling them, and then we kind of seem to bring out the confidence that might have otherwise been missing.
So in the continuing on the theme of innovation, you have a partnership with Delta Airlines. They have a 49% stake in Virgin Atlantic. One, to what extent do you and Delta, are you able to learn from one another? Obviously, you've got a great brand, so does Delta. You're innovative in different ways. Where have you learned from one another? And two, Virgin Atlantic does have a very good name. Delta is also a very strong company. How do you, from a marketing standpoint, from a culture standpoint, protect Virgin Atlantic so you don't become Virgin Atlanta?
That was well too rehearsed. I get asked about the second part of that question quite frequently, both inside the company and outside the company, and that is that there was a fear at Virgin Atlantic for many, many years of associating this brand very closely with any other brand, actually, Delta or otherwise. And the company resisted partnerships, well, deep partnerships anyway, for quite some time. And right around the time I joined, this Delta deal was announced, and I have to say, it is really, really clear that for both Virgin Atlantic and for Delta, we absolutely need to remain Virgin Atlantic. Delta needs us to compete with British Airways in the UK like we always have. They do not need us to be less successful at that. That would make it a very bad investment for them to have acquired 49% of a company and then done anything that would have decreased its ability to effectively compete. So Delta actually has been encouraging us to try and find more ways of differentiating, not the opposite. So there's no intent for these brands to come together as one brand. The companies can transit passengers with each other and hopefully complement each other in terms of our frequent flyer programs and our corporate relationships and our agency programs, and learn from each other, and I'll get that. So that brings me to the second part of your question. Delta clearly has looked at us as an opportunity to learn some of the magic you described earlier. They have people who are very committed to Delta Airlines. The culture is a very family-oriented culture, and they've looked for things from us. For example, they've taken some of our design principles in our clubhouses and moved them into some of their new lounges. They're looking at a premium economy cabin as something they might consider for the future, which is not just 4 extra inches, but actually probably more like a business class cabin of 25 years ago. And we, on the other hand, are really taking advantage of scale with Delta in areas like handling our maintenance requirements here in the United States, or automation, where they have much more money to invest in technology that can give us a platform from which we can actually become more technically advanced at providing better information to our people and more integrated information around our company. So I think there's a great synergy between the two that doesn't risk either brand going away in any fundamental sense.
Okay. So from a marketing standpoint, as you and your colleagues look at marketing Virgin Atlantic. How do you think it changes going forward over the next few years compared to how it's been done before?
Well, the word marketing is actually can be interpreted as a lot of different things. I think when I think of marketing, I really do think of the entire equation. And so in some ways, Virgin Atlantic has to remain true to Virgin Atlantic throughout. And that is the way in which the brand feels different. I've always described my role at my coming to Virgin Atlantic as being welcomed into a place that's much cooler than me. And I think that feeling that we need to create for our customers has to continue to be the essence of the Virgin Atlantic brand, welcoming and cool at the same time. And I think that magic is really critical. But in terms of things that will evolve over time, I do think that having better information in the hands of our people to help to give our customers better differentiated service and better information in the hands of our customers to engage with us in ways they would prefer are inevitably the way that technology and marketing are evolving that I think can allow us and again, it's a great example of being a little bit smaller and more nimble to give us actually an ability to have an advantage on the closeness of a relationship between us and our customers and between our people and both the company and our customers through technology.
So as a for instance, would it be Google Glass or son of Google Glass with all of your customer-facing employees? Is it something that an app or something that your passengers would have?
I think you asked a question that's broad enough that I was speaking beyond our actual next year planning horizon or 2-year planning horizon, but at the very least, it's certainly devices in the hands of our people that have more real-time information about our customers. And I think you've seen airlines begin to move in this direction, and we think it's a critical part of building a better product or a better service, and enabling our people to do what they do well even better than they do today. The fact that today on board an airplane, our people don't know that the last time that you flew with us, was a wedding or something that you were headed to, or some piece of information that you gave us that we didn't then subsequently utilize. I think we live in an era where people assume, and good companies demonstrate, that if you give them information in one location, it's with them, it's still present the next time you interact with that company. And we have kind of limited ability to do that today, and I think that's a real huge opportunity area for us.
So do things like advertising and other traditional tools for the marketing department, do they become less important going forward?
The answer to that question is I don't think so. I think there's, I didn't take your question as an advertising question. Clearly the percentage of our advertising that we spend in ways that is more targeted towards someone looking to buy, so online in particular, has risen relative to traditional media, and I doubt that trend is going to change. But there is a big role for brand advertising for companies who have to try and differentiate and are not going to win in a commodity space, and we think that will remain a critical element going forward.
Okay. Last question before we open for audience Q&A. A week or two ago, there was some news about people trying to revive Concorde and put it back into service. Whether it is that or something else, do you think that we'll ever see supersonic flights coming back into the commercial airline industry?
You said the word ever to start with, so I'm going to say yes.
Well,
if you say anytime in the near future, I'm going to say no. Obviously, we have Virgin Galactic,
right.
Richard's enterprise, to try and create the capability to take people into low space. That is still an ongoing activity that Richard is very committed to, and the company is busy building the next spaceship. And it's been, that's obviously had some difficult circumstances over the last year. But I still think there's obviously other competing space-type programs. And inevitably, these kinds of investigations can lead to new technologies which could affect the long-term answer to your question. But I don't see it likely that in the next 4 to 5 years, if you want to take that as near term, that we would see any real change in that space.
Okay, great. We'll now open it up for audience questions. I think there are folks who have microphones, and they will come to you. So please raise your hand and wait until the mic is with you, because it's a big room and we want to make sure everyone can hear. Great, thank you.
Good morning. I'm Joe Leader, the CEO of the Airline Passenger Experience Association, and the reason I wanted to ask you a key question about passenger experience on Virgin. Love upper class, had a great flight on Virgin Atlantic in upper class this summer, and used to be that Virgin Atlantic was the worldwide leader in the upper class experience. And during my experience, the flight attendants were asking me for suggestions, saying, we feel like we're not leading where we used to lead. What are your feelings on that, and what do you envision for Virgin Atlantic moving forward?
Well, I think, one, thank you for flying us. I appreciate the business. Two, I do think that it is clearly true that over the last 10 years, we've seen hard product leadership clearly has shifted to the Middle East, right? I mean, and I don't think Virgin Atlantic is likely to have the financial resources to make ourselves the leader in that space as we once were. Okay, so I think our cabin crew remember those days when we were the equivalent of what the Middle Eastern carriers are now in shaking up the industry from a hard product perspective. So I think we are unlikely to return to the days of the next making an even bigger big screen television in the space that we've seen with the Emirates and Etihads of the world. So if that's the reality, then innovation for us has to be in areas that allow our people to deliver better for our customers, or in entertainment or other technology things that can make the customer experience on board the aircraft better, that are not all about size and spend. So that's kind of how our thinking has shifted. And I would say that our cabin crew don't always recognize the extent to which they themselves are the differentiator. But that's what I get the most letters and comments about from our customers. And that's what shows up in the transatlantic customer survey data that I look at every month, that shows us as the top carrier between Europe and the United States on customer service metrics in both the business class cabin, which is our upper class, and in economy. So I think actually the magic is ensuring that we give our people the tools and the products on board that they can deliver with pride, that allows them to have frequent positive interactions with our customers, because that actually seems to be the winning formula for our brand today.
Does anyone else have a question?
Oh. Martin Stoll from Sparkloft. Skift is a conference about disruption. The whole Virgin empire is founded on disruption. The three big international US carriers at the moment are fighting two disruptions. One is long-haul, low-cost carriers like Norwegian, and then the Middle East carriers coming. What is Virgin's perspective on those two disruptions? And is it, let's say, did you have to pivot your opinion on that in light of having Delta owning 49% of you?
So what I would say, and what I've said about this throughout, is we are a company that believes in competition, and we believe in level playing fields. And from our perspective, the Middle Eastern carriers are already very significant, flying from the UK to the Middle East. We view them as competitors, and we look forward to continuing to compete. With regard to the second part of your question, no, Virgin Atlantic is a separate enterprise from Delta. They do own 49% of our company, and we do work very closely with them as a partner and as a shareholder. But our position on that issue and any other is what's best for Virgin Atlantic.
But what about the growth of the low-cost carriers long haul? There's WOW out of Iceland, Norwegian from Europe to the US.
Yep.
Do you see that as a challenge to Virgin Atlantic, or do they go after a different type of a customer? And do you not feel that they are going to be a challenge to you over the next 5 to 10 years?
The answer is I think every competitor is a challenge. That's the nature of the airline business. And we look at Norwegian's pricing, and we adjust our prices to make sure that customers who would prefer to fly on a Virgin Atlantic have at least a fare that recognizes the market that Norwegian competes in. So I do not think of them as going after a separate set of customers. I think of them as a viable competitor, and I take them very seriously. And when we look to try and offer the services and amenities we offer, we're doing so with an eye to competing both with carriers like the Middle Eastern carriers and with carriers like Norwegian. And we think that's the nature of the competitive airline marketplace. And like I said, we were founded on on creating competition, and it's not something we shy away from.
Great. All right. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time. We need to stay on schedule.
Sorry.
So, Craig, thank you very much.
Henry, thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Okay.